Hey guys, tonight we journey somewhere muddy, smelly, and completely unforgiving. Medieval Europe. You blink your eyes open to a low, smoky haze, the scent of wood ash, and something worse. You're lying on a lumpy straw mattress and something's crawling in it. You sit up too quickly and knock your head against a low wooden beam. Congratulations. You're in a peasant's cottage in the year 1347. And spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and the time you're listening. I love seeing where you all are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can't quite tell if it's morning or just always this dim. Your bed is a sack stuffed with straw, crawling with fleas. You try not to think about it. There's a faint drizzle outside. Of course, it's not the cinematic thunderstorm kind of rain, more like a constant wet whisper that soaks through everything. The walls are wattle and daub, wooden lattice caked with mud. It's cold. You huddle under a rough wool blanket that smells like goat and defeat. There's no bathroom. That corner over there, that's the chamber pot, and it's full. You eye the door, which doesn't quite latch, and shuffle outside in hopes of finding somewhere more dignified to relieve yourself. There isn't. You're standing ankle-deep in mud. Chickens eye you suspiciously. A pig trots by like it owns the place. It probably does. The village around you is barely more than a few squat homes clumped together like survivors in a muddy sea. The road isn't a road. It's just where the mud is slightly deeper, trodden down by years of passing feet, hooves, and wagon wheels. Trash, excrement, and kitchen scraps blend into a sludge that coats everything. Shoes? If you're lucky, you're wearing wooden clogs. If not, let's just say you'll know exactly what you stepped in. You duck into a neighbor's hut to ask a question, and instantly regret it. The smell hits you like a war hammer. People haven't really cracked the whole bathing thing. Water's cold, firewood's expensive, and superstition whispers that washing too often opens your pores to disease, so everyone smells like sour sweat and boiled onions. And that's on a good day. Outside, the village is waking up. A rooster crows. A blacksmith clangs metal, probably working on yet another horseshoe. Someone is shouting about their missing goat. Again. Your head is already aching, but there's no ibuprofen here. Just a headache and the quiet knowledge that it'll likely last all day. A boy trudges by with a yoke over his shoulders, 2 wooden buckets of water swaying dangerously. He's fetched it from the local stream, which is also where the villagers dump waste and do laundry. And sometimes, yeah, you can guess the rest. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly understood the link between contaminated water and disease. But let's just say their track record wasn't great. There's a rumor going around that a traveler brought news of something strange happening in the East. A sickness, they say. Buboes, they whisper. But here, gossip moves slower than the rats. For now, your biggest concern is breakfast, if you're allowed one. You trudge back to your hut, step over a sleeping dog, at least you hope it's sleeping, and wonder how anyone survived this era at all. Here's a historical fact to anchor your dread. Life expectancy hovered around 30 years. Sure, that's skewed by high infant mortality, but still, if you made it to 40, you were basically a walking miracle. Like a celebrity, but covered in lice. By now, your stomach is rumbling and your clothes are wet through. They're made of wool because that's what's available. And no, it doesn't dry quickly. You feel every scratch of the coarse fabric against your skin. There's a belt made of rope holding your tunic in place, and your feet are already blistering from the wooden soles. You don't even want to think about what's going to happen when winter hits. You spot someone tossing slop out their window with all the ceremony of throwing glitter at a parade. It lands in the middle of the lane. You sidestep it barely. That lane? It's not just the road, it's the sewer. Everyone's sewer. No wonder the rats look so confident. They own this town. Even the church, looming a bit higher on the hill, can't escape the damp. Moss creeps up its stone walls, and the interior smells like wax, mildew, and ancient worry. You'll get to know that place well later, but for now, you're more concerned with surviving the next hour. A quirky little tidbit? In some parts of medieval Europe, especially early on, people believed that sleeping naked invited evil spirits to your bed. Which is funny, considering how aggressively those spirits smell like sweat and hay. So far, you've been awake for maybe an hour. You're wet, hungry, itchy, and more than a little overwhelmed. And guess what? It only gets worse from here. But hey, at least you haven't caught the plague yet. You're starving, and breakfast is calling, or rather, it's muttering. Because in medieval Europe, breakfast isn't a glorious spread of eggs, bacon, and golden pancakes. It's more of a whispered apology to your stomach. You sit at a roughly hewn table, the kind with splinters waiting to leap into your skin. On it, a coarse loaf of yesterday's bread, hard as a cobblestone, and a chunk of yellowish cheese that smells like a wet cellar. The bread was baked with flour ground on a millstone, meaning it's full of grit, actual stone dust. So when you chew, you're slowly wearing down your teeth. Surprise! That's why most adults back then had the dental profile of gravel. You break off a piece of the bread and bite down. Crunch. Was that a rock? Possibly. You keep chewing, grimacing. Your jaw already hurts, but at least it's food. There's also a jug of goat's milk. It's warm. It's always warm. And it has a faint tang that tells you it's just about to cross the line from sour to, you'll regret this. You sip it anyway, and instantly regret this. Historians still argue whether most peasants actually drank much milk, or whether it was mostly turned into butter and cheese for easier preservation. But in your tiny, muddy hamlet, there's a goat outside who just looks like he's mocking you. So milk it is. There's a tiny slab of salted pork hanging from the ceiling, but it's not for you. That's for special occasions, like if a local noble visits, or someone dies, or both. For now it's just bread, a little cheese, and maybe some onions or leeks if you're lucky. Fresh fruit? Not unless it's summer and someone hasn't beaten you to the orchard. Sugar? Oh, sweet summer child, sugar's for royalty and apothecaries. You have honey if you're very lucky, but more likely you just get to enjoy the natural flavor of things, which is to say, bland and vaguely soil-like. Now, let's say you've got some stew left from last night. It's mostly turnips, onions, and whatever's been foraged recently. No refrigeration, obviously. So you sniff it. Smells earthy, which is what you tell yourself when you're trying not to notice that it might be a little fermented. It's fine. Probably. Maybe. You eat it anyway because hunger wins. You scrape the bottom of the wooden bowl and realize something unpleasant. that bowl is yours. Like, personally. People don't have sets of dishes. They often carry their own utensils to meals. Your knife is strapped to your belt. Your bowl is probably shared with other family members and hasn't been washed since ever. A quirky tidbit. In some households, a thick slab of stale bread called a trencher served as a plate. After the meal, it was either eaten, soaked with stew juices, or tossed to the dogs. In fancier homes, they were given to the poor. So technically, medieval nobles invented edible dinnerware and takeout boxes. As you're chewing, you hear coughing from next door. Deep, chesty coughing. Again, someone in that house hasn't stopped wheezing for days. You look down at your food and try not to think about airborne disease. After all, you don't really know about bacteria or viruses. You just know when people start hacking like that, they either get better or don't. Someone hands you a piece of dried fruit, a rare treat. You bite into it. Sweet, chewy, and slightly dusty. Still better than that milk. The fruit likely came from a summer harvest and was dried by the sun, then packed in a clay jar and stored in the pantry, assuming you have a pantry, which is more like a small corner shelf with a cloth over it to keep out rats. Spoiler, it doesn't. You think about heating some water. Good luck. The hearth is cold and firewood is precious. You're already rationing it. You consider trying to warm the water with hot stones, but even those are hard to come by unless someone's been managing the fire overnight. So, cold water it is. You sip it carefully, trying not to taste the bucket it's been stored in. Let's just say oak flavor was not a feature anyone asked for. Want coffee? Tough. Tea? Not in your region. Cocoa? Cute. What you do have is small beer, low alcohol, watery ale. Even children drink it. Why? Because it's safer than the water most of the time. Brewing it involved boiling the water, so it killed a lot of the bacteria, and you don't drink it to get drunk. You drink it to avoid getting dead. Some mornings, there's pottage bubbling on the fire if you're lucky. It's been cooking for days, literally. Ingredients come and go. It's like a medieval slow cooker. Throw in cabbage, oats, a bone for flavor, let it sit and thicken. Pottage was the MVP of peasant meals. But it never stops tasting like wet yard clippings. You shovel it in. You go to scratch your head and realize head lice, of course. Your hair itches, your scalp is tender, and even the kids are scratching. Nitpicking is a literal chore. There's no shampoo. Maybe lye soap if you're lucky, but even then, it's harsh. You try not to think about it. Instead, you chew your gritty bread and count your blessings. You're still alive. So far, a neighbor knocks, wants to trade eggs for onions. You glance at your pantry and sigh. No onions. You offer a small hunk of hard cheese instead. The neighbor frowns, shrugs, and accepts. Trades like this happen constantly because money, actual coin, is scarce. Bartering is the true village currency. You walk out with your meal and sit on a tree stump. The fog hasn't lifted, the mud is deeper than before, and your back already aches. But at least your stomach isn't empty anymore. That counts for something. And then you hear the faint, unmistakable sound of someone retching. Probably someone trying their luck with spoiled meat. Botulism, salmonella, or just the fact that meat's been sitting out since Tuesday. No one's entirely sure what causes food poisoning, but it definitely exists, and it's very real. You say a quick prayer, you never find out firsthand. Still, there's something strangely comforting about this rhythm. Morning, bread, goat milk, and survival. For now. The sun barely pokes through the gray clouds, and you shuffle off toward your next ordeal. Because in medieval times, there's no rest after breakfast, just more dirt, more danger, and the slow creeping sense that your teeth are quietly planning their escape. You step outside, ready to face the day. But first, you really need to use the bathroom, which is a problem, because there isn't one. You glance around for privacy. There's none. Just a few muddy alleys, a handful of withering hedges, and the open fields. People aren't shy about this. When nature calls, you answer, preferably behind a bush, but not always. The ground squelches under your feet as you make your way to the edge of the village, trying to find a spot that doesn't already smell like someone else's morning routine. Congratulations! You've officially joined the Chamber Pot Club. In your home, nestled in the corner like an unfortunate secret, is the family's prized bathroom substitute, a clay or wooden chamber pot. It's basically a bowl, a very unlucky bowl. You relieve yourself into it during the night or when it's raining too hard to brave the yard. Then, in the morning, someone is responsible for emptying it. That someone is you. So you carry the pot outside, arms extended, face turned away, hoping not to trip. Where do you dump it? Why, right into the street, of course. That's what everyone does. There's no sewer system, not unless you're in a wealthy city. And even then, it's more of a sewer-ish situation. Most villages simply rely on gravity and hope. You fling the contents into the gutter, where it joins a merry stream of waste, rainwater, and spoiled stew. The chickens cluck in disapproval. A dog comes over to sniff. You gag a little and go back inside, pretending this part of your morning didn't happen. Now your hands are dirty, so you wash them, right? Well, yes, kind of. There's a basin with some water in it and a rag that's been reused too many times. No soap, unless you made some from animal fat and ashes last season. So you splash a bit of cold, greasy water on your fingers and call it clean. Germ theory won't be invented for centuries, but your instincts tell you something here isn't right. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly filthy or just differently clean. There's evidence that some bathed regularly. Communal bathhouses were once popular, but during the later Middle Ages, public bathing declined sharply, partly due to fears of disease and partly due to shifting ideas of morality. In other words, don't get naked or God might get mad. You spot a neighbor scrubbing her laundry in the stream. She's beating it with a wooden paddle, like it insulted her. The soap is homemade, if it's used at all. More likely, she's using lye and elbow grease. The clothes, once white, are now a permanent shade of beige, gray, brown. They never fully dry, and they always smell a little mossy. Your own clothes are stiff with yesterday's sweat, mud, and goat hair. You consider changing, then remember, you don't have a spare outfit. Most peasants own maybe 1 or 2 tunics. Underwear, if it exists, is just another wool layer. No elastic, no comfort, just itchy rebellion against your skin. You spot a toddler waddling down the road with no pants on. Completely normal. Toilet training here is less of a milestone and more of a let's hope he figures it out eventually scenario. Diapers aren't really a thing either. Some babies are swaddled, but once they're mobile, it's open season. You pass a house with smoke pouring from the roof. Someone's trying to fumigate lice. How? By burning herbs indoors. The smell is a powerful mix of rosemary, sage, and mild panic. it probably won't work. The lice will just wait it out and return stronger. Now comes the bath question. When was your last one? You don't remember. There is a wooden tub, but it's used sparingly. Heating water takes forever. Filling the tub is a multi-person job. So when bath day does happen, everyone uses the same water, eldest to youngest. You? You're somewhere in the middle. Enjoy your lukewarm sibling soup. And no, there are no scented bath bombs. Just coarse soap, rough hands, and the overwhelming desire to not be the last one in the tub. Let's add a quirky tidbit. In some places, people believe that rubbing one's body with linen cloths rather than bathing was better for health. Clean the skin by wiping off sweat and dirt, sure, but avoid water, which was thought to unbalance your humors. Yes, the same humors that included black bile, yellow bile, blood, and phlegm. No one knew what they were, but they sounded serious. The richer folks, they sometimes had garderobes, basically fancy outhouses built into castle walls where waste dropped straight into the moat or pit below. Charming. There's even evidence that nobles kept herbs in these bathrooms to help mask the stench. The idea of toilet paper, not really a thing. You'd use moss, hay, a scrap of cloth, or your hand, your left hand, which is why shaking hands with that one was frowned upon. You glance at your fingernails, they're lined with dirt. You don't even bother trying to clean them anymore. Everyone's look like this. You start to scratch an itch on your neck, then stop. You're pretty sure that's where the fleas live now. You're not alone. Everyone in the village is hosting some kind of parasitic party. It's a full ecosystem under every tunic. There's a medieval belief that the cleaner you look, the more suspicious you are. If your hair is neat, your skin glowing, your clothes immaculate, people might think you're vain, diseased, or consorting with spirits. Better to be just clean enough to not attract flies, but dirty enough to blend in. You wipe your hands on your tunic. It's already filthy, so what's the harm? The sun's peeking through the clouds now, casting weak light across the village. There's a man yelling about needing help with a latrine pit that's overflowed. You pretend you didn't hear him. You have your own problems. And you're still hungry. Time to head out for work. But before you do, you take one last look around your tiny, muddy world and realize this is normal. No one complains. No one expects anything better. This is just how life is. No flush toilets, no soap aisles, no bath towels, just you, your chamber pot, and the eternal hope that the wind blows away from your face on latrine day. You're already sore, itchy, and slightly nauseous, and the sun hasn't even reached its highest point yet. You step out the door and instantly trip over the hem of your tunic. It's too long. It's always too long. You try to hike it up without looking like you're wearing your older siblings' clothes, but that's exactly what's happening. In fact, everyone is wearing hand-me-downs, passed from parent to child, from sibling to sibling, and occasionally patched so many times the original fabric is basically folklore. Today's outfit: a rough wool tunic belted with a length of cord that might have once been part of a boat sail. Over that, if you're lucky or it's cold, a mantle, a kind of half-cape blanket scratchy hug. Shoes? Ha! Let's talk about those. They're wooden clogs, solid, unforgiving, and about as ergonomic as walking with bricks tied to your feet. Some people wrap bits of cloth around their feet for comfort, but all that really does is soak up more mud. You clomp through the village, sounded like a one-person percussion section. Want socks? Too bad. Socks are for the wealthy. Your feet will stay cold, wet, and mildly tragic until spring, maybe longer. Now, let's be honest. Fashion here isn't about self-expression. It's about survival. Clothes aren't trendy. They're just functional enough to keep you from freezing to death. Color? If you're lucky, your tunic is a dull, faded brown or gray. Natural dyes are expensive, time-consuming, and often toxic. That bright blue or deep crimson you saw in a history book, reserved for nobles, you'd be lucky to get mustard yellow made from, ready, urine-fermented weld plants. Yes, that's right. Some dyes were urine-based. And yes, someone had to collect it. There were actual professions where people gathered human pee for textile production. So next time you complain about your part-time job, remember, at least you didn't have to be a piss collector. You pass a woman wearing a linen head wrap, trying to keep her hair neat and the lice somewhat contained. Women often wore veils or wimples, partly for modesty and partly to signal their age or marital status. You see a few younger girls with loose braids, but they'll likely be married off before you learn their names. You try not to stare, but honestly, it's hard not to. Courtship in medieval times is a game of glances, awkward proximity, and hoping no one's watching. Because, yes, they will gossip. And yes, they will assume you're already planning your wedding after a 2-minute conversation. Let's zoom in on your tunic. It's made of wool, probably spun and woven in your own village. It smells faintly of smoke and sheep. There's a crude patch under one arm, stitched with a needle made from bone. Metal needles exist, but they're expensive and easy to lose. So people improvise. Your belt is fraying. You tie it anyway. Underneath, you're wearing a rough linen shift. It's supposed to be your only layer of underwear, which you'll wear for weeks before it gets washed, if ever. The friction alone is enough to make you dream of modern fabrics, elastic waistbands, soft cotton, fantasy, literal witchcraft. Historical fact break. Buttons weren't common until later in the Middle Ages, and even then only among the upper classes. You, a humble peasant, rely on brooches, ties, and sheer stubbornness to hold your clothes together. You step carefully across the mud-slick path toward the common area, avoiding puddles. Not because of the water, because of what might be in the water. Your clogs help a bit, but they also collect grime like a medieval Roomba. A child runs by, barefoot. You wince. But to them it's normal. Their soles are like leather. Shoes are optional for kids, especially in warm seasons. You see the same child later picking something off his tunic and eating it. Best not to dwell on what it was. You meet a traveler on the road, a merchant maybe, or a messenger. He's wearing actual leather boots, and his cloak has a hint of color to it. You're impressed. He smells slightly better than everyone else, which makes you suspicious. Has he bathed? Is he rich? You ask where he's from. He tells you a town 50 miles away, and it feels like he might as well have said the moon. You nod, as if you've heard of it. The merchant offers you a small strip of dyed cloth. "Try this on your tunic," he says. "Spice things up." You consider it. The color is a bright red, not exactly subtle. You tuck it into your belt and say thanks, then immediately regret it when 2 village women eye you and start whispering. Fringe tidbit. In some medieval towns, laws actually restricted what colors or fabrics commoners could wear. These sumptuary laws were designed to keep social classes visibly distinct. If you wore silk or royal blue and weren't nobility, you could get fined, or worse, Fashion wasn't just about taste, it was about status, survival, and obedience. Let's not forget accessories. You don't have any. Maybe you've got a small pouch tied to your belt with a few coins, if you're very lucky. Inside it might be a charm, a bit of dried herb, or a tiny carved figure to keep away spirits. People back then loved amulets. Religion and superstition weren't opposites. They were roommates. You carry your pouch close. Your clothing weighs you down. It's damp, itchy, and smells like a mixture of mildew, smoke, and regret. But you press on, because fashion in the Middle Ages isn't about comfort. It's about not dying of exposure. As you head into the fields, your clothes drag against the wet grass, absorbing even more moisture. You try to roll up your sleeves, but the wool resists like it has a grudge. You finally manage, but now your arms are cold and your wrists itch. Welcome to the medieval moisturizer. Chafing. Some people wear hoods, not separate ones, just long extensions of the tunic they can pull over their head. If it rains, you just get wet. If it snows, you get very wet. And if it's windy, you hope you're not wearing anything that flaps, because wool slaps hurt. You see a noble riding by in the distance. His boots are polished. His tunic is embroidered. His cloak is lined with fur. You can feel the class divide like a wall in your chest. He's not dodging puddles. His horse splashes through them. He doesn't notice you. You pull your belt tighter and keep walking. The tunic itches. The wind picks up. You cough. A chicken runs across your path, feathers flying. It's a new day in the Middle Ages, and your outfit hates you. You're barely dressed, barely clean, and already regretting being born in the wrong millennium. And now it's time for work, a term that, in medieval times, doesn't mean sitting in a chair looking at numbers. It means back-breaking, sun-up to sundown, body-destroying labor that guarantees exactly one reward: the chance to do it all again tomorrow. As a peasant, you don't own the land you're working. The Lord does. You're just borrowing it in exchange for services, taxes, and unwavering obedience. You trudge out to the fields with a crude wooden hoe slung over your shoulder and a crust of bread in your pocket. There's no clock-in system here, just the sun telling you it's already too late to be this tired. Today, you're part of a team assigned to harvest wheat. It's late summer, and the golden stalks rustle in the breeze like they're laughing at you. You step into the field and instantly get slapped in the face by the sharp, dry bristles. One gets in your eye. You wipe it away with your sleeve. Big mistake. Your sleeve is covered in mud, ash, and what you're 70% sure is animal dung. Your eye now itches forever. You bend down to start the harvest. There's no combine harvester here, no tractor, no ergonomic tools, just your hands, your back, and something resembling a sickle that has seen better centuries. You slash and gather until your spine starts sending urgent messages like, "Please stop this madness." People around you aren't chatting. They're breathing heavily, focused. Work is communal, but not exactly social. A teenage boy cuts his finger and doesn't even pause. A woman nearby sneezes and just keeps reaping. Everyone has the same goal: survive this day without collapsing. Fun historical fact: the average medieval peasant consumed about 3,000 to 4,000 calories a day and still lost weight. Why? Because they were burning it. Between plowing, planting, harvesting, hauling water, chopping wood, and general survival acrobatics, your body is in a constant state of hunger. Medieval farming isn't rustic. It's war. The Lord's steward rides by on horseback, making sure nobody's slacking. You keep your head down. You're not technically a slave, but you're close. You can't leave the manor without permission. You owe labor on the Lord's land. You pay taxes in grain, eggs, or chickens. And if you complain, there's a ditch with your name on it. You pause for a break and nibble your pocket bread. It's dry. Your teeth hurt. You chew it anyway. Someone hands you a piece of onion to go with it, and for a moment it's almost a sandwich. You sit on a rock. That rock is damp. You get up. Across the field, you see oxen pulling a wooden plow. A man is guiding them, shouting, sweating, struggling. It takes two people, sometimes three, to do what one modern machine could accomplish in minutes. You're watching agriculture in hard mode. Every furrow is a battle. Scholars still debate how much freedom peasants really had. Some argue that life was harsh but consistent, simple, structured, and even communal. Others point to the crushing obligations and frequent famine and say, nah, this was economic jail with extra mud. Judging by your back, you're leaning toward the jail theory. Midday sun is overhead now. It's hot. Your tunic is soaked through. You smell like sheep. You've inhaled enough dust to start coughing, and there's a splinter in your palm from your hoe. You try to pick it out with your teeth. No one judges you. Everyone's done it. Let's not forget the animals. Oxen aren't graceful. They're loud, smelly, and stubborn, and you have to clean up after them. You scrape the manure into a wooden cart. It will be used as fertilizer. Your job? Mix it into the soil with a rake, a wooden rake. You want to cry. You can't. You're too dehydrated. A break finally comes, signaled by a church bell in the distance. You walk to the shade of a tree and sit beside others. They're chewing quietly, sipping small beer from clay mugs, and staring into the void. One man pulls out a bit of dried apple and shares it. It's the highlight of your day. Someone nearby has a boil on their arm. It looks angry, infected. You glance away and hope it's not catching. You've seen people go from fine to buried in a matter of days. Germs aren't part of your vocabulary, but fear definitely is. Want a quirky tidbit? In many villages, there was a communal oven because individual households couldn't afford to burn that much firewood. People would prepare dough at home and then bake it together. You had to mark your loaf with a unique symbol to make sure no one accidentally took the wrong one. Medieval bake-offs had very real consequences. Back to work. The sun is dipping slightly, but there are still hours to go. You move to threshing, the process of separating grain from chaff. How? By hitting bundles of wheat with a flail until your arms scream. The dust flies everywhere. You sneeze. You keep going. There's a pile that needs processing before nightfall. There's no shade, no gloves, no music, no breaks. You think about modern jobs and cry inside. You look at your hands. They're blistered, raw, and shaking slightly. You remember your feet are wet again. You try not to think about it. Another steward rides by. You nod. He doesn't nod back. Dinner is still hours away. Sleep is further. You try not to imagine tomorrow, which will be exactly the same, except maybe it rains, or the oxen trample someone, or the Lord demands extra grain because of a feast he's planning. All perfectly normal. It's almost dark when you're allowed to stop. You stand up straight and feel every muscle scream in betrayal. You can barely lift your arms. You trudge back toward your hovel, stomach gnawing at itself. You pass a few others walking silently, boots squelching in the mud. As you near your door, someone shouts behind you, "Hey, want to help mend the fence after supper?" You pretend not to hear. You step inside, fall onto your straw mattress, and close your eyes. You've earned your sleep, but not your rest. That comes later. Maybe. Sleep barely counts in this world. Your muscles throb, your joints crackle, and the straw poking through your mattress has started a mutiny against your spine. But it's not the pain that wakes you. It's your tooth, specifically one molar, the angry one. It has decided that this is its time to shine. The ache isn't sharp at first. It's dull and pulsing, a sort of distant drumbeat behind your jaw. But the longer you lie there, the louder it gets. You prod your cheek gently. Bad move. It feels swollen. Is it infected? Probably. You have no floss, no toothbrush, no antiseptic rinse, just pain and time. You stumble outside, half-dressed, hand on your jaw, muttering mild curses that haven't been invented yet. The village barber lives near the center of town. That's where you're headed. Yes, barber. Because in medieval times, the person who cuts your hair also pulls your teeth, applies leeches, and, when they're feeling ambitious, performs minor surgery. You approach the low hut with the faded red and white pole outside. Yep, those classic barbershop poles. Originally, they symbolized bloody bandages twisting around a rod. Cheery, right? Inside, the barber is heating iron instruments over a flame. That's not a great sign. You tell him about your tooth. He nods slowly and gestures to a wooden stool that looks like it's seen things. There are no gloves, no anesthesia, no Novocaine, no, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Just a nod, a rusted iron tool, and a faint prayer that you pass out before it really gets going. The barber uses a hook to pry your mouth open. You grip the stool. You taste blood already. He wedges something into your cheek to keep your jaw open, then, without warning, yanks. Everything goes white. You don't scream so much as grunt through your nose like an ox under a wagon. The pain explodes in your skull. Your arms go numb, and you hear a squelching sound that will live rent-free in your nightmares forever. Then it's over, sort of. He shows you the tooth like a prize. It's blackened at the base. Maybe that means the infection is gone. Or maybe it means it was just getting started. He stuffs a wad of rag into the empty socket and tells you to chew herbs on the other side of your mouth for a few days. Oh, and avoid salt, or meat, or talking, or being alive. You stumble home, drooling blood, slightly dizzy. The pain has changed. It's sharper now, but at least the pressure's gone. You try not to think about what might happen if the infection spreads. In this world, dental surgery is less a treatment and more of a gamble. Here's a fact to chew on, gently. Medieval people did have dental care of sorts. There were herbal pastes made from crushed mint, pepper, and vinegar. Mouthwashes existed, some using wine or sage, but most care was preventative. Once a tooth got infected, your best bet was to remove it before it killed you. And yes, teeth could absolutely kill you. An untreated abscess might turn septic. You wouldn't know what's happening, but you'd feel weak, feverish, and slowly fade away. Toothaches weren't just inconvenient. They were fatal threats masquerading as minor annoyances. But maybe you're lucky. Maybe it heals. Let's shift to another common ailment, back pain. From yesterday's harvest, your spine feels like it's been tied in a knot. You try stretching. The result is a series of pops that sound like snapping twigs. A neighbor tells you about a remedy. Hot stones wrapped in cloth and placed along the spine. You try it. It's warm and heavy and slightly comforting until the cloth slips and the hot stone rolls down your back and lands in your lap. You yelp. The neighbor chuckles. Everyone's had a stone accident at least once. Now your jaw hurts, your back is tender, and your mood is approximately boil on a donkey's butt. You hobble through the village toward the herbalist's hut. She's not a doctor, but she's your best hope. She offers you a tisane, a weak herbal tea made from chamomile, willow bark, and something that tastes suspiciously like dirt. You sip it. It's bitter, but calming. She presses a small cloth pouch into your hand, dried herbs to be tucked under your pillow for healing dreams. You nod, thankful. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval people believed that sleeping with a dead mole tied around your neck could cure a toothache. You think about it for a second. Nope. Hard pass. Still, the herbalist is your only semi-reliable healthcare provider. There are no licensed physicians in your village. The closest doctor lives in a monastery several towns over, and even he prefers bloodletting to actual medicine. Speaking of which, bloodletting. The barber offers that too. It's based on the idea of balancing your four humors. Remember those? If you're sick, it must mean your blood is too hot or too wet or too upsetting to the moon. The cure? Slice open a vein and drain some of that rebellious blood. The tools? A small blade, a bowl, and a vague sense of regret. Historians still argue whether bloodletting ever helped or was just ritualized trauma. Some claim it had psychosomatic benefits. Others think it was just a socially acceptable way to feel worse before dying. You decide to skip the bloodletting. You've lost enough fluid for one day. On your way home, you see a man with bandages over his eyes. Word is, he stared at a solar eclipse a week ago. Or maybe he just got ash in his eyes from the forge. Either way, he's stumbling through town holding a stick. Someone's guiding him gently. You think about your own situation, your pain, your dizziness, your splintered tooth, and suddenly you realize this is normal. This is baseline. Everyone's walking around half-wounded, half-healed, fully resigned. Pain is part of life. You carry it like an extra layer of clothing. As you pass by the church, a monk is reading aloud in Latin. You don't understand a word, but the sound is comforting. People believe healing comes through prayer, through relics, through divine will. You step inside, light a candle, and kneel. Maybe your molar gets a mention, maybe not. Outside the sun is setting. Your head throbs. Your cheek is still swollen, but the bleeding stopped, and you're not dead yet, which by medieval standards makes today a win. You lie down on your straw mattress. The herbs under your pillow smell like old grass. You close your eyes and dream of toothbrushes, morning again. Or at least a lighter shade of gray leaks through the wood slats in your windowless hovel. You're sore, your jaw is tender, your stomach is growling, and your shirt somehow smells worse than it did yesterday. But today, there's no time to wallow, because today you've been summoned, not by royalty, not even by your landlord. No, this summons comes from the lord of the manor, the man who controls the land, the livestock, and technically, you. A village boy with one shoe and 0 eyebrows, don't ask, runs to your hut breathless, shoves a crude note into your hand, and bolts. You unfold it, or try to. The ink is smudged, the parchment is damp, and honestly, you're not sure it's even meant for you. But someone mutters that the Reeve is calling all able bodies for a public work. That includes you, aching tooth or not. So, you trudge up the muddy path toward the manor estate. Your feet squelch in the muck, and your cloak does absolutely nothing to block the chill breeze. When you arrive, the village Reeve, a wiry man with exactly one eyebrow more than the messenger, shouts your name and points to a wheelbarrow full of crude tools, spades, shovels, buckets, and one axe with questionable stains on the blade. Apparently, you're digging drainage ditches today. You glance around. Dozens of peasants just like you are being barked into action. Men, women, even a few sprightly kids, all bent over in various states of misery. No wages today. This is your feudal duty. Here's the fact of the day. If you're a serf, you owe labor to your lord, often several days per week. That's in addition to rent, crops, and various gifts during holidays. Serfdom is less a job, more a lifelong unpaid internship. With mud, the work is brutal. You stab the shovel into wet earth again and again. Each scoop weighs as much as regret. Your back protests. Your hands blister, but you keep going because the Reeve has a stick and very little patience. Someone collapses nearby. No one blinks. It starts to rain halfway through the morning because, of course, it does. The trench turns into a puddle. Your feet sink deeper. A boy loses his boot and decides not to retrieve it. The boot is claimed by the earth. Midday arrives. A bell rings. Everyone pauses. You collapse under a tree with a hunk of bread and a slab of cheese the color of old rope. It's not bad, but it's also not mold. You chew slowly. Try not to think about your jaw or the smell or the fact that there's a beetle crawling on your sleeve. You don't brush it off. It's probably better groomed than you are. Suddenly, a commotion erupts. At the edge of the field, a nobleman approaches on horseback. His cloak is bright red, his boots gleam, and he looks at the peasants the way a cat looks at a puddle. His retinue, 2 armored men and 1 very bored-looking clerk, ride behind him. He doesn't stop, just surveys the trench like it's a tapestry, then moves on. No one dares meet his eyes. The power difference is staggering. He owns this land. You are this land. You wonder what he does all day. Hunt? Feast? Ignore tooth pain completely? And here's your quirky tidbit. Some medieval lords were legally allowed to try minor crimes committed by their peasants. That means if you stole a chicken, your landlord could arrest you, hold court, and even sentence you, all while sitting on a slightly more comfortable chair. You keep digging. By late afternoon, you can't feel your legs. Mud has crusted into a second skin. You're colder now, despite the exertion. You begin to realize how fragile you are. One slip, one bad fall, one infected scratch, and you're done. There's no safety net, no compensation, just the hope that someone remembers your name next week. You drag your shovel toward the tool shed and return it to a crooked rack. The Reeve grunts at you, dismissed. You limp back toward your hovel, each step a silent scream from your thighs. The village looks the same, drab, muddy, and alive in that half-hearted, weary way. Smoke curls from chimney holes. A child chases a goose. someone shouts about firewood. You pass by a woman boiling something outside. It smells earthy. You ask what it is. She tells you it's a poultice for her husband's foot, which has turned black. You nod and back away. Historians still argue whether medieval lords were truly as cruel as they're portrayed, or if it's a case of a few bad apples getting all the press. Some were known to be generous, even protective. Others, well, let's just say they didn't lose sleep over dead peasants. That night, you collapse into your straw bed, shoes still on. Your muscles twitch involuntarily. You can't move, but you earned nothing today. No coin, no reward. Just the privilege of continuing to live on borrowed land. You whisper a few words of prayer, though you're not sure to whom. Then drift into sleep, dreaming of dry boots and a chair with a backrest. You wake to the sound of screaming, not the panicked kind, just loud, repetitive, matter-of-fact shrieking that says, something is being born, or something is dying. You pull yourself upright. Your whole body groans in protest, but you shuffle outside anyway. A small crowd has gathered around a cottage near the village well. You spot the midwife's scarf, bright blue with soot-smudged edges, and realize someone's in labor. Childbirth in medieval times? Let's just say you should probably brace yourself. You linger outside, like everyone else not directly involved. Only women are allowed inside the cottage. It's a deeply gendered affair. Men wait, pace, or drink. Children try to peek through the cracks in the wooden walls until someone shoos them off. Inside, the birthing mother has been laboring for hours, maybe days. She's sweating, wailing, probably biting down on leather or a stick. There's no anesthesia, no sterile gloves. The midwife uses herbs, maybe holy relics. The air inside is thick with heat, incense, and fear. You shift uncomfortably. Childbirth is dangerous now. Back then, it was one of the leading causes of death for both mother and baby. A simple breech birth could end 2 lives. Infection? Practically guaranteed. Hemorrhage? No blood transfusions here, just cloth, pressure, and prayer. Here's a mainstream fact. In some regions, maternal mortality during childbirth hovered around 1 in 10. For context, that means you could lose a friend, sister, or daughter every time someone had a baby. And remember, women were expected to have many. Suddenly, the screaming stops. You hold your breath. A moment later, a thin, warbling cry emerges. It's not strong, but it's there. The crowd collectively exhales. Someone claps. Someone else whispers, thanks to a saint. Then the midwife appears at the doorway, sweat-soaked and triumphant. The baby is alive. The mother is conscious. For now, you wander away, not sure how to feel. Relieved, sure, but also unnerved. Birth here is a miracle every time. Let's talk babies for a second. Once born, an infant is swaddled tightly, arms pinned, legs bundled. The idea is to keep them straight and warm. You've seen village mothers strap babies to boards or tie them into cradles with rope. It's a little unsettling, but the infants seem content-ish. There's no formula, of course. Breastfeeding is the only option unless you're wealthy enough to hire a wet nurse, which you're absolutely not. Some families use animal milk if desperate, but that often ends poorly. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval parenting advice included rubbing a baby's gums with harebrains to help with teething. You hope that was more rumor than practice. Then again, The bar for science here is somewhere underground. But once the baby's born, it doesn't get a name right away. Not until baptism. You've witnessed a few baptisms. They're short, wet, and solemn. Water from the church font, a few muttered Latin words, the sign of the cross. Some believe the act protects the child from evil spirits. Others see it as a legal stamp of humanity. Before baptism, the baby is in a kind of limbo, neither fully part of the world nor fully divine. Historians still argue whether this delay in naming contributed to emotional detachment. Did medieval parents avoid bonding too soon, knowing that so many babies died early? Some scholars think so. Others argue that parents loved just as deeply. They just grieved more often. You walk past a home with 7 children clustered around the hearth. The youngest is maybe 4. The oldest already working in the fields. Childhood is a brief blur here. As soon as you can carry a bucket, you work. Toys are sticks, rocks, and occasionally dead rodents. If a child owns a doll, it's likely made of rags. You've even seen one carved from a turnip. Education, only if you're wealthy or living near a monastery. Otherwise, kids learn by watching, copying, and being yelled at. You stop by the well to draw some water. A boy no older than 9 is hauling 2 pails as big as his torso. He grunts, but doesn't complain. You help him balance the load. He nods and thanks. Already half a man. Meanwhile, your jaw still hurts. You pass the herbalist again and ask for something stronger. She offers a paste made from crushed sage and salt. You smear it on your gum. It burns. That probably means it's working, right? Back in your hut, you find a rat sitting on your blanket. You both freeze. It stares, then waddles away, completely unfazed. You make a mental note to patch the wall. Again. That night, you hear another baby crying in the distance. Not the newborn. The other one. The one whose mother passed last week. The aunt is raising it now. She looks tired, but she sings to the baby every night, soft and low. You lie down, sore and weary. You're starting to understand something profound. Life here is a constant negotiation with death. Whether it's childbirth, infection, hunger, or weather, every day is a roll of the dice. And yet, people still sing, still raise children, still hope. You drift off to sleep, wondering if the baby will make it through winter. You wake to silence, which, in medieval terms, is rarely good. No birds, no livestock, no clanging pots or arguments about stolen chickens. Just that eerie, padded quiet that makes your skin crawl. You sit up slowly and squint out your door. There's smoke on the horizon, not the cozy kind from a hearth, the acrid black kind, rising in a slow spiral from the edge of the woods. You hear shouting, distant but growing. Then bells, not the church kind, warning bells. You're already moving. Your feet hit the dirt. Neighbors are pouring into the muddy lanes, eyes wide. A man stumbles past you, clutching a bloodied arm. Behind him, another man yells about riders and the northern road, raiders. You've heard the stories. Sometimes it's bandits, sometimes rival lords' men, and sometimes it's just desperate people with weapons and bad timing. You race toward the manor's edge, where smoke coils through the trees like a live thing. The reeve is shouting commands. A few of the stronger villagers grab pitchforks, axes, clubs. Not swords. Those are for real soldiers. You're not real soldiers, and yet you're being told to fight. Here's the medieval reality check. If your village isn't walled, and most aren't, you're fair game. Lords might offer protection, but unless they have a standing guard, rare. You're on your own. You're handed a dull spear and pushed into a line with 3 other men who all look equally unqualified for heroism. One of them is already crying, and then they come. Half a dozen riders, maybe more, not knights. These men wear mismatched armor, carry curved blades, and scream nonsense as they charge. The first wave hits a nearby barn. Flames leap skyward. Chickens explode in all directions. A woman shrieks. You stand frozen. Everything happens too fast. A rider knocks down the crying man beside you. Another swings wide and is yanked from his horse by a farmer wielding a hay fork. The attacker doesn't rise. You jab forward with your spear. It connects. With what? You're not sure. But someone screams and topples. Your hands shake violently. You might be bleeding. Or maybe that's someone else's blood. And just as suddenly, it ends. The raiders scatter. Maybe they were just probing. Maybe they found richer spoils elsewhere. Maybe you scared them off. Though that seems unlikely given you're currently hyperventilating and clutching your chest like an unpaid actor in a tavern play. When it's over, there are 3 bodies, 2 villagers, 1 raider, more wounded, more traumatized. You sit in the mud, numb. Across the square, a mother is pulling her child from a collapsed shed. The child is screaming. That's a good sign, you tell yourself. Screaming means alive. Here's your historical fact. Most medieval communities had no real policing. Protection came from a network of oaths. Lords owed service to kings. Vassals owed service to lords. Peasants owed obedience to both. But in a raid, oaths didn't stop arrows. You help carry one of the wounded to the herbalist's hut. He's pale and shivering, and there's a gash across his ribs that keeps pulsing blood. The herbalist wraps it in honey-soaked linen. It smells oddly pleasant, which is disconcerting. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval remedies included stuffing wounds with moss, wine-soaked bread, or even spider webs. It sounds ridiculous, but some of those methods actually worked. Moss has natural antiseptic properties, and wine could kill bacteria. Spiderwebs, well, the jury's out. Later, as the sun sinks, you help bury the dead. It's not a formal ceremony, just shallow graves, whispered prayers, and a few mumbled apologies. One man tries to sing a hymn. He forgets the words halfway through. Historians still argue whether medieval villages were truly helpless or if communities developed their own systems of militia and mutual defense. Some chronicles describe brave, coordinated resistance. Others just list names, dates, and casualty counts. That night, the village is quiet again. Not peaceful, just stunned. You sit with the others near the central hearth. No one talks much. Someone passes around a skin of ale. It's bitter but warming. You sip and stare into the flames, wondering if the raiders will return. Wondering if next time you'll be braver, or smarter, or faster, or luckier. Eventually, you stumble back to your hut. Your spear is still in your hand. You lean it by the door like it belongs there. Maybe now it does. You lay on your pallet, muscles tight, heart finally slowing. Outside, the crickets resume their chorus, oblivious. You sleep with one eye open. You're jolted awake by pain. Again, Not fear this time, not a spear wound or a rat bite, though both seem disturbingly plausible by now. No, this is deeper, more internal. Your joints ache, your back screams, your stomach churns. You sit up slowly, every movement stiff. You feel 40. You're probably 19. Welcome to the mid-medieval burnout arc, where chronic illness, malnutrition, and physical labor are just called normal. You step outside into the gray morning, rain drizzles again, and the mud squelches beneath your feet like it resents your existence. Today's task? Foraging. Because the last raid scorched half the grain stores, and until the next harvest, every mouthful counts. You're handed a sack and sent into the woods with 2 others. You don't get a bow or a sword, just a stick. Maybe for mushrooms, maybe for morale. The forest is quiet, but not comforting. You keep scanning for movement, human or otherwise. There are wolves out here, boars too, and bandits who'd love your boots, even if they're falling apart. You start gathering whatever looks edible, wild garlic, berries, some bitter greens the herbalist insists are good for purging. You try not to think too hard about what needs purging. A few mushrooms catch your eye, spotted, plump, inviting. You reach out. One of your companions slaps your hand away. "Those'll make your guts dance out of your ears," she mutters. Mainstream fact. Medieval people knew surprisingly much about plants, what healed, what hurt, what could kill you slowly and poetically. Some of this came from Roman texts, some from word of mouth, some from monks copying old manuscripts in chilly candlelit scriptoria, and yet people still died of parsley confusion more often than you'd think. After an hour, your sack has maybe enough greens for a sad salad. You also found a half-eaten apple and a squirrel skull. So, not exactly a bounty. Your group pauses by a stream to drink. The water is fast-moving and cold. You hope that's enough to make it safe. You hope every time. Germ theory is 600 years in the future. People here think illness comes from bad air or imbalances in the humors. Wash your hands? That's for the paranoid. You remember the village priest's recent sermon, how sickness is sometimes a divine test or punishment, or maybe just fate. Helpful stuff. As you kneel by the stream, you notice red splotches on your forearms, maybe from the mushrooms, maybe bug bites, maybe the plague. Just kidding. Probably. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval folk wore amulets filled with crushed emeralds or frog hearts to ward off illness. Others carried dried toads. You've seen one tied to a belt like a purse. Disturbingly fashionable. Back at the village, things are quieter. The wounded are healing, though one man still coughs blood. The baby from a few nights ago is doing better. Her cheeks are pink, her cries louder. She's being passed from arm to arm like a tiny, demanding loaf. You share your foraged haul with a herbalist who nods at the greens, scowls at the apple, and tells you to burn the squirrel skull. You do, just in case. Later, you're assigned to help repair the sheep fence. It's a sad zigzag of crooked stakes and desperate optimism. As you hammer a peg into place with a rock, because hammers are luxury items, you hear a distant bleating. One sheep has escaped and is now wandering directly toward the woods. Of course, you chase it. You don't want to chase it. Your legs don't want to chase it. But that sheep is dinner, wool, and half your reputation, so you grit your teeth and follow. Through mud, through brambles, over roots, until finally you catch it, your hand twisted around its matted wool, both of you panting. And that's when you see the bone, half buried beneath leaves, not quite human, but definitely not animal. You freeze. It's old, or maybe not. The sheep doesn't care. It just wants to chew something it shouldn't. You tug it back toward the village, casting one last glance at the bone. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants thought often about death, or whether it was so routine, so daily, it didn't require thought at all. Was it horror or just background noise? You drag the sheep through the village gates. A few kids laugh at your muddy state. One offers you a crust of bread. You take it. It's hard enough to chip a tooth, but still. That night, by the fire, you listen to an old woman tell a story. She's blind, but her voice is sharp. She speaks of a night turned into a tree, of a woman who nursed a dragon, of stars that used to sing before humans sinned too loudly. Is it myth, parable, madness? You don't care. It's warm, the fire crackles, your head lolls, and for a moment you don't feel the cold in your bones, or the ache in your gut, or the growing red rash on your arm. You just feel here, alive. Still here. You're awakened, not by roosters or bells this time, but by coughing. Deep, rattling, painful coughing. It's not yours. You sit up and glance across your hut. Your neighbor, Thomas, is hunched over near the fire pit, arms wrapped around his ribs, face pale as goat's milk. The cough sounds wet, the kind that doesn't go away with garlic poultices or honeyed onion paste. You offer water. He waves it off, barely able to breathe. Welcome to the next chapter of medieval living. Sickness. But not just the sniffles. We're talking about the slow, creeping kind. The kind that knocks out entire families. The kind that might explain why the hut next to yours has been empty for 3 days. You slip outside, the morning air damp and heavy. Fog clings to the ground, thick as wool. You nod at a few villagers. No one smiles. They're all doing the same mental math. How many are sick now? Because something's spreading. At the well, 2 women whisper about it. Started with Marta's boy, one says. Then old Anna, now Thomas. Same cough. The other just shakes her head and mutters a prayer. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval villages were absolute breeding grounds for disease. With limited sanitation, no antibiotics, and the tendency to share everything, from beds to bowls. Illness didn't just go around. It bulldozed. By mid-morning, you're helping dig a new ditch at the edge of the village, not for water, for graves, preemptive ones. It's a thing people do when enough of them start coughing in rhythm. Digging helps calm the nerves. Grim, but oddly practical. Tomas doesn't leave his hut all day. Neither does Marta's boy. By evening, you're helping the herbalist again, gathering yarrow, boiling water, soaking rags. You grind dried sage and mix it into a steaming broth so bitter it makes your tongue revolt. You're not sure it helps, but it feels like doing something. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval people believed that tying a live eel around your neck could cure a sore throat. Others swore by roasted hedgehog. None of those options are on tonight's menu, though someone does show up with a bowl of beetle broth. You're not tempted. As night falls, the priest visits each hut, murmuring blessings. He doesn't step inside, just makes the sign of the cross and moves on. He looks afraid. Historians still argue whether medieval healers helped more than they harmed. Some were genuinely skilled with herbs and wound care. Others offered astrology-based diagnoses or advice like, avoid bathing, it opens your pores to demons. You sleep poorly. You dream of coughing, not even your own. By morning, Tomas is gone. Just gone. No one says it, but they know. His door is shut. A cloth hangs from the lintel. That's all the sign you need. You help two men lift his body, still wrapped in a blanket, and carry it toward the new ditch. There are 3 other bundles waiting. You lower him in without ceremony. Dirt falls like rain. And then, as if by some cruel cosmic balancing act, a cry breaks the silence. A birth. You glance across the field. Near the baker's hut, a woman cradles a slippery, red-faced infant. She's laughing and crying at once. You feel a strange pang, something like hope, or maybe confusion. Because death and life just coexist here, side by side, one breath in, one breath out. No drama, no fanfare. You head to the stream again, this time to wash your hands. You scrub with crushed rosemary as you saw the herbalist do. Is it effective? Who knows? But you do it anyway. You do it all anyway. Later, you sit with others around the hearth and talk turns, strangely, to music. Someone found a bone flute in the woods. Ancient, maybe, or just forgotten. It still plays, sour and high and haunting. A boy tries a few notes. It sounds like wind through bare trees. Everyone listens. In a world of sickness and silence, music matters. And here's the thing, no one really tells you. Most medieval people didn't just endure hardship, they built beauty around it. Songs, prayers, carvings on doorposts, chalk drawings on walls. Little things to remind them they were still more than animals scrabbling for scraps. You go to sleep thinking about that flute, about the baby, about Thomas, and you dream, finally, of something that doesn't end in coughing. The sun is blazing when you wake up. For once, it's not the cold gnawing at your bones, but heat that pricks your skin and sticks your shirt to your back. You squint against the brightness, almost disoriented by it. Is this a nice day? You step outside and blink. The air smells vaguely of sheep and damp earth as usual, but there's something else too, an energy. Kids are running around barefoot. Someone is hammering in the distance. The baker has fresh loaves out and is actually humming. Something's happening. Turns out, today is the feast day of Saint Felix, protector of the sick and poor. Or was it Saint Fervidus? The villagers aren't entirely sure, but it's a day off from regular labor, and in this world, that's more sacred than theology. Feast day doesn't mean party the way you know it. There's no chocolate fountain, no disco ball. But by medieval standards, this is high living. Bread, cheese, and, gasp, eggs. Someone even roasted a rabbit. Where they got it? Don't ask too many questions. You're told to clean up and look presentable, which in practice means splashing water on your face and maybe brushing hay out of your hair. Fancy. Mainstream historical fact. The medieval calendar was packed with feast days, some religious, some seasonal. It gave peasants rhythm and something to look forward to. Some years had over 80 such days, though few offered much actual rest. At the center of the square, the priest leads a short service. It's more song than sermon, and the villagers actually sing along, rough, warbling voices that still manage to harmonize like they've been doing it for centuries. Because they have. Afterward, there's a kind of communal picnic. You're handed a chunk of brown bread and a boiled egg, still warm. It tastes like a miracle. You close your eyes and let the salt hit your tongue like it's imported gold. There's dancing, not elegant ballroom stuff, more stomping and spinning and the occasional trip over a hem. Someone pulls you in. You try not to embarrass yourself. You fail. Laughter erupts. You realize that for the first time in what feels like weeks, you're actually laughing too. Then comes the mummer's play. A troupe of traveling actors has arrived, ragged, theatrical, covered in grease paint and confidence. They roll in with a cart that serves as stage, home, and possibly storage for a very judgmental goose. The play is chaotic. There's a knight who speaks in rhyme, a dragon made from two boys under a painted blanket, and a princess who slaps everyone with a wooden spoon. It's hilarious, slightly scandalous, and deeply weird. Quirky tidbit. These plays weren't just entertainment. They often snuck in political commentary, moral lessons, or even subtle jabs at the nobility. One popular play ended with Death marrying a corrupt landlord. The audience loved that. A boy throws a turnip at the dragon. It becomes part of the show. You're not sure what the plot is anymore, but you're smiling until your cheeks hurt. After the performance, the actors pass around a hat. Coins, bread, and even a pair of socks end up in it. You toss in the hard end of your loaf. One of the actors bows dramatically at you. As the sun begins to set, the mood softens. Someone starts singing a slow tune, lullaby-ish. Others hum along. You sit on a log, watching the firelight dance on faces around you, so many of them weathered, scarred, but warm. Historians still argue whether peasants had leisure time, or if every non-working moment was spent on survival. But today proves it. They made time, even in famine, even in fear. They found hours for joy, raw, messy, precious joy. You find yourself next to a girl weaving wildflowers into a braid. She offers you one. You hesitate, then tuck it behind your ear like it's completely normal to do so while covered in pig mud and existential dread. She laughs. "You look ridiculous," she says. You do, and it feels kind of perfect. You sleep outside that night under the stars, too full of bread and rabbit and life to care about the bugs crawling over your boots. You listen to frogs chirp in the distance and the crackle of leftover logs and the soft breathing of people too exhausted to worry. And for just this one moment, medieval life doesn't seem so impossible. It even feels, dare you admit it, kind of beautiful. The party's over. You wake stiff, dew-covered, and mosquito-bitten. The fire is long dead, and the only thing moving is a very smug chicken picking breadcrumbs from someone's discarded cloak. You stretch, sore from sleeping on lumpy earth. And just like that, the glow of feast day is gone, replaced by the less glamorous rhythm of reality, chores, responsibilities, and an aching reminder that this world never lets you get too comfortable for too long. Your task this morning? Sheep? You are, apparently, now a shepherd. You're handed a staff taller than you and a satchel of dried peas. To bribe the smart ones, the old man says, nodding toward the flock. You think he's joking. He's not. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval times, herding wasn't just about watching sheep graze. Wool was big business. England, for example, was practically built on it. Kings taxed it, nobles traded it, and peasants depended on it. A good shepherd wasn't a fool in a field, he was critical infrastructure. You follow the flock past the edge of the village, up into the open hills. It's peaceful at first. Birds chirp, wind rustles the grass, and the sheep stay in a relatively coherent blob. You start to think, hey, maybe this will be your thing. Then one of them bolts. You chase it awkwardly through a thicket, over a log, across a stream, muttering things you probably shouldn't say in the presence of St. Felix. When you finally catch it, you're soaking wet and bleeding from what may or may not have been a bramble booby trap. The sheep blinks at you. You're sure it's laughing. You trudge back, humiliated and speckled in what you desperately hope is mud. Halfway through the day, you begin to understand why shepherds in old stories always seem to be daydreamers, poets, or inventors of musical instruments made from animal bones. It's quiet out here, too quiet. Your mind wanders, you start naming the sheep. One becomes Kevin. One's definitely a Mildred. You talk to them, they don't respond. Except Kevin. Kevin headbutts you. Quirky tidbit. Some shepherds in the Alps used alphorns, those ridiculously long wooden horns, to communicate across valleys. In Britain, shepherds developed shepherd's whistles that could control their dogs using complex notes. You have neither, so you just yell, "Hey!" a lot. As the sun dips, you head back to the village with the flock mostly intact, minus one ewe who wandered off and returned with an unsettlingly smug foxtail in her mouth. No one asks questions. That night, sitting around the hearth, an elder tells you about Black Shuck, a giant ghost dog with flaming eyes that stalks lone travelers. Especially shepherds, she says, always shepherds. You sleep a little less easily after that. The next day, you graduate to a new kind of pastoral fun, shearing. It's nothing like those soothing ASMR videos. It's chaotic. Sheep do not want to be sheared. You get kicked twice, then pooped on. Once, you struggle to hold down a woolly bundle of resistance while another villager skillfully snips away thick, greasy fleece. Historians still argue whether wool production was sustainable in most regions or if it led to overgrazing and environmental collapse. What's clear is that it required serious labor. One fleece could weigh up to 8 pounds and take hours to process. Your arms are jelly by midday. Your back feels like someone installed a medieval torture rack between your shoulders. And you now smell like damp lanolin and regret. You sit by the stream to scrub off the grime, using ash soap that burns in all the wrong places. A boy joins you, laughing as he splashes his arms. "It gets better," he says. "You stop smelling it after a while." Great. Back in the village, the fleece is combed, spun, and woven, not by machines, but by hands, patient, calloused, blistered hands. You watch as a girl spins wool into yarn using a drop spindle, humming to herself like it's muscle memory. You try it. Your yarn snaps instantly. She laughs, and it's not mean. At dusk, there's a moment of rare tranquility. You lie on your back in the field, watching the sky change color. A few sheep wander nearby. Kevin chews your bootlace. You don't stop him. You begin to realize something strange. For all its discomfort and drudgery, there's a rhythm here, a kind of music in the repetition. Tend sheep, gather herbs, fix fences, shear fleece, haul water, sleep, and repeat. There's no to-do list, no pings, No calendar invites, just tasks and time and things that need doing because no one else will do them. And you, somehow, are part of that now. You pull your cloak tighter as the wind picks up, and you hear a wolf howling far off in the trees. Or maybe it's black shuck. You try not to think about that. You fall asleep in a hayloft, limbs aching, head heavy, but heart strangely full. Not happy, exactly, but real. Morning arrives with a sharp cough and a dull ache in your chest. You blink awake, shivering despite the thick straw around you. Your nose is running, your joints hurt, and someone nearby is moaning into their blanket. Oh. You shuffle to the edge of the loft, and a woman below looks up, concerned. "Stay there," she says, fetching a bucket of something that smells like wet bark and regret. You've got the ague. You want to ask what exactly ague is, but your teeth are chattering too hard to form a sentence. Spoiler. It's probably malaria, or typhoid, or the flu, or just what they called anything that made you feel like death but didn't kill you immediately. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, people didn't know about viruses or bacteria. Germ theory wouldn't come along until centuries later. Instead, sickness was blamed on imbalanced humors, evil spirits, or breathing bad air, aka miasma. So when you start sweating buckets and seeing little sparkles dance behind your eyelids, you're treated not with rest or fluids, but a steaming concoction made from mashed leeks, garlic, old ale, and, if you're unlucky, crocodile dung. Yes, that was a thing. Remember the sunscreen? You manage a few sips before gagging. The woman pats your back, then lays a damp cloth over your forehead, like that will fix the internal dumpster fire raging through your body. Some villagers are sympathetic. Others eye you warily, already backing away. "Hope it's not the plague," someone mutters. Again, you want to scream. You manage a wheeze. That night, you lie curled on your side, hallucinating some sort of glowing bird flapping overhead. It might be a dream. It might be death. You're honestly fine with either. Quirky tidbit. People in the Middle Ages slept in 2 shifts, first sleep and second sleep, with an hour or 2 awake in the middle of the night. They used that time to pray, tell stories, or check on sick family members. You're pretty sure yours just use it to cough more. The village healer visits the next day. She smells of rosemary and grave dirt, and her fingers are stained from boiling plants. She gives you a tisane made from willow bark, which actually does contain salicylic acid, a pain reliever similar to aspirin. You almost cry. She also rubs goose fat on your chest and ties a string of garlic around your neck. You now smell like an overcooked dinner that's gone very, very wrong. Historians still argue whether medieval medicine was completely useless or surprisingly effective, considering the lack of scientific knowledge. The truth is, a lot of herbal remedies did work, but they were mixed with things like pigeon dung and astrology. At one point, someone puts a leech on you. You don't ask why. You're too tired. You drift in and out of sleep for what feels like days. Sometimes you hear chanting. Sometimes it's singing. Once, you're pretty sure a pig comes into the loft and just stares at you, judgmentally. When your fever finally breaks, the world feels like it's underwater, muffled, slow, and thick. But you're alive, somehow. You're weak, though, shaky. Every step feels like dragging a bag of bricks. But the chores don't stop just because you nearly died. So you return to them sluggishly, fumbling everything, Someone gives you a stale crust of bread and says, "Good to have you back." You don't reply. You're still trying to figure out how to chew. Later that week, you attend a funeral. It's for a boy not much younger than you. Pneumonia, they think. Or maybe infected wounds. No one really knows. The priest sprinkles holy water over the grave, the family cries, and everyone else just stands silently, not out of coldness, out of habit. Death isn't rare here. It's a constant, heavy drumbeat in the background of every task, every meal, every sunrise. Childbirth, risky, a toothache, dangerous, a bad cut, could mean infection and amputation. You look at your own hands, scarred, scratched, still a little green from the leech, and realize just how easily it could have gone the other way. Still, the village doesn't wallow. There's wool to spin, cabbage to plant, roofs to patch. Mourning is brief because survival doesn't wait. You return to your duties, quieter now, a bit slower, more careful. At night, you lie in your blanket, staring at the wooden beams above, listening to someone breathe heavily beside you, not in sleep, just tired, always tired. You whisper a thank you to the strange glowing bird, just in case it was real. And you promise yourself, if you make it through this, you'll never take ibuprofen for granted again. You're not even fully recovered yet when the shouting begins. It starts with two voices, raised, angry, heated, then a third, then a hoarse neighs. You sit up in your hay pile, groggy and already dreading whatever comes next. Because this isn't an argument between neighbors over chickens again. This is louder, heavier. You step outside, blinking in the sun, and see the commotion. A nobleman's steward, armored and haughty, is reading aloud from a scroll while the villagers gather, murmuring uneasily. Something about taxes. Something about failing to deliver the full wool tithe this season. Something about consequences. You try to slink back inside, but you're already noticed, and now you're part of this too. Mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, especially under the feudal system, peasants owed a portion of their crops, animals, or goods to their local lord or the church. These were often called tithes, usually 10%, but sometimes lords got creative and demanded things like candles, honey, Labor Days, or, as you now learn, raw wool. The problem? There's no more extra wool. The flock barely made it through the winter. Too many sick sheep. Too many hungry families. Too little margin for anyone to squeeze anything else out of the land. So the steward does what stewards do. He enforces. He marks 5 sheep with red chalk and takes them. People groan. One woman sobs. You just feel numb. Kevin, your favorite sheep, is among the chosen. Of course he is. You want to yell. You want to stop them. But you're unarmed, fever-weakened, and this man is flanked by 2 guards in chain mail with real swords and real apathy. So you watch. Quirky tidbit. There are records of villagers in 14th century England stealing back sheep from noblemen at night. One group in Yorkshire even disguised themselves as women to confuse witnesses. And apparently, it worked. You think about this a lot. That night, someone whispers of rebellion. Just a whisper. Nothing serious. Not yet. But you've heard the name Wat Tyler tossed around. You've heard mutterings about how much grain the church takes, how the nobility gets fat off your labor, how maybe things don't have to stay this way. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were mostly docile or quietly simmering with resistance all the time. The truth is, both can be true. People adapt, people endure, but eventually, when there's nothing left to give, even sheep farmers snap. You don't join the whisperers yet. You still have your health to regain, and let's be honest, you're still holding out hope Kevin will miraculously escape and come bleeding back like a woolly hero. He does not. Instead, over the next week, everything feels heavier. The weather turns. Rain lashes the village for days. Crops drown. Chickens vanish. A dog goes mad and bites two people, both of whom are locked in a hut until God decides their fate. You don't ask. You help patch a roof. You carry stones for a new wall. You help a girl with a twisted ankle hobble home from the forest. You're so tired, you forget to eat. Twice. And then the priest announces there will be a pilgrimage. Of course there will. This is how medieval people respond to stress. When the world shakes, you walk. The village is heading to a shrine 3 towns over, seeking divine favor, protection, and maybe a miracle or two. You're invited, or more accurately, expected, to come, because communal prayer is everyone's business. You pack a meager bundle: bread, dried peas, a wooden cross someone carved for you. The road is long, muddy, and filled with other pilgrims who all smell like old stew and wet wool. You walk behind a man who sings badly for 3 hours. You nearly slip into a ditch twice. You start chanting psalms just to stay awake. At night, you sleep in barns or under hedgerows. Someone plays a lyre. A child cries. You stare at the stars and wonder what on earth you're doing here. The shrine, when you arrive, is underwhelming. A stone building, a relic encased in glass, maybe a saint's finger, or a tooth, or, according to a skeptical old woman beside you, a chicken bone dipped in perfume. But you kneel, you breathe, you pray. You don't know to who exactly, but the act itself is calming, familiar. You light a candle, you close your eyes, and for a moment the world stops spinning. You walk home slower, quieter, not healed exactly, but steadier. You arrive to find your village mostly intact. The stewards returned again, this time with demands for labor. A new road must be built for the king or the bishop, or maybe just because someone higher up wants it. You don't even ask anymore. You're handed a pickaxe and pointed toward the forest. Dig. That's your entire day now. You dig. Your hands, still tender from earlier illness and soaked from rain, blister instantly. The pickaxe is heavier than it looks, and the mud is deeper than anyone predicted. You and a dozen others are meant to clear a new path through the forest, an order that came down from someone who's never held a shovel in their life. Welcome to corvée labor, mainstream historical fact. In medieval Europe, especially under feudalism, peasants were often legally bound to provide unpaid labor for their lord a few days out of the year. This corvée work could include road building, bridge repairs, fortifications, or clearing land for the manor's benefit. No pay, no choice, just obligation. You keep digging. You dig through roots and clay, rock, and worm-laced soil. You dig until the sun burns your shoulders. You dig until your back feels like it's being slowly unscrewed from your spine. You dig beside a man named Tom who keeps muttering about signs in the sky and a wheel of fire that appeared over his field last night. You edge away from Tom discreetly. But maybe he's not completely off, because as the second week of forced labor rolls on, weird things do start happening. The air grows still, too still. Birds vanish. The sky turns the color of overripe peaches. And then the rain begins. Not drizzle, not a storm, but sheets of water falling sideways, as if God upended a river over your head. Then the thunder, and not the kind that rumbles in the distance. This is the kind that shakes the ground, that cracks through trees, that makes grown men drop their tools and sprint for the nearest anything with a roof. You all huddle under an old watchtower skeleton as lightning forks through the forest. Quirky tidbit. Medieval people often believed lightning was divine punishment or the wrath of saints. Entire churches were built with iron bells that would be rung during storms to break apart thunder, based on the belief that sound could scare the clouds. So naturally, Tom is now trying to chant a hymn to calm the sky. He's off-key. Very off-key. Historians still argue whether medieval people were truly superstitious or whether it was more of a survival reflex, an attempt to make sense of chaos with the only tools they had: stories, symbols, ritual. You can't blame them, because when lightning strikes a tree less than 20 feet away from you, splitting it with a sound like the world's angriest drum solo, you also start praying. Just a little. When the storm finally passes, the work resumes, like nothing happened, because the road must be finished, and your sweat is cheaper than stone. The mud has now reached your ankles. The wheelbarrows are useless. One man breaks a toe. Another cuts his hand on a buried shard of old metal, maybe a blade, maybe just rust. You wash it with rainwater and hope for the best. You've stopped asking for gloves. There are none, and your fingers are so swollen they barely bend. You fall asleep that night with your arms twitching from phantom digging, and then the dreams begin. You're in a forest, but not this one. It's older, darker, full of glowing symbols carved into the trees. You hear voices, not angry, not gentle, just ancient. You see your own hands buried in soil, pulling out something smooth, oval, and pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. You wake up screaming into your straw mat. Everyone pretends not to notice. That morning, the work stops. Someone has unearthed bones, human ones, long, pale, curled as if buried in sleep. Maybe plague victims, maybe something older. The steward pauses the project until the church can weigh in. You don't ask what that means. You just thank whatever forest ghost sent you that dream. You're reassigned to hauling stones for a nearby wall, which, compared to digging, is luxury. You talk less now. You think more. You're not sure if it's the fever hangover, the storm, or just plain exhaustion, but everything feels just slightly unhinged. People walk differently. Crows follow you longer than they used to. You keep hearing flute music at night. No one else does. Still, life carries on. A festival is approaching, the Feast of St. Michael. The village begins preparing. Bread is baked, ale is brewed, a pig is saved from slaughter for a spit roast. It's the one time of year when even peasants get to feel vaguely victorious. You help string herbs over doorways. You carve a small figurine out of wood for the festival games. You even help catch the pig when it escapes and leads half the village on a merry chase through a cabbage patch. You're still finding leaves in your boots days later. The night before the festival, You sit by the fire and watch the smoke curl toward the stars. Someone plays a lute. A woman sings a song about a knight who fell in love with a ghost. You think about dreams, about lightning, about bones. You think about Kevin. Rest in wool, buddy. The next day, you wake to drums. The festival is here. You wake to drums, and for once, they're not signaling doom. The village has transformed. Banners flap lazily in the early breeze, strung between thatched rooftops like sleepy smiles. The smell of roasting meat, baking bread, and fermenting apples fills the air. Children run wild with painted faces, clutching homemade ribbons and wooden toys. A juggler drops a pin and curses, then flashes a grin as the crowd laughs anyway. It's the feast of St. Michael. And for one glorious day, medieval misery presses pause. You barely recognize your neighbors. That angry woman who once chased a boy with a pitchfork over stolen onions? She's now dancing barefoot in the dust with bells on her ankles. That grim-faced blacksmith, he's arm-wrestling 3 men in a row and laughing like a drunk bear. Even the steward, notoriously allergic to joy, offers a half-smile and a happy Michaelmas grunt. You're swept into it, whether you want to be or not. Mainstream historical fact. Feast days in the Middle Ages were more than religious observances. They were often the only time peasants could rest, feast, dance, or indulge in simple pleasures without fear of punishment. On St. Michael's Day, Michaelmas, commoners celebrated the archangel who was said to defeat evil, often with big meals, games, and bonfires. It marked the end of the harvest season and the start of darker days. You join a game of Tug the Piglet. Yes, that's real. A greased piglet is released into a ring, and whoever catches it wins a prize. Sometimes the pig, sometimes a pie. You don't win, but you do end up covered in mud and tackled by a surprisingly strong child. Fair trade. After that comes the dancing, and you're pulled into a line before you can even protest. The tune is simple, lilting, repetitive, infectious. The steps are easy enough. Left foot, right foot, spin. You manage not to trip anyone, which feels like an Olympic victory. A girl with a violet ribbon in her hair spins beside you. She laughs when you nearly stumble into a barrel. You laugh too. It's a weird sensation. You don't remember the last time your ribs moved like that from anything but coughing. There's a moment just before sunset when the entire village seems to shimmer in gold. The smoke from cooking fires swirls up into the sky like prayers. Children sleep in hay piles. Musicians lean into their instruments. Even the animals look relaxed. Goats napping, chickens fluffing their feathers in peace. It's perfect, which, of course, means something's about to go wrong. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval festivals were considered rowdy enough that temporary lords of misrule were crowned. Fools or commoners given power for the day to turn the world upside down. They could boss around nobles, demand performances, even punish the village priest with silly forfeits. Your village doesn't have a lord of misrule, but it does have a traveling fire breather. And he's just lit his beard on fire. A panicked scramble ensues. Ale is spilled, and 3 people try to put him out with cabbage leaves. You'll never forget the smell. Once the chaos dies down and the stars claim the sky, the mood shifts. Softer, sleepier. The dancing slows. The music quiets. Bonfires crackle and people gather closer. Someone begins to tell stories. You sit beside them, arms around your knees, listening as tales unfurl of dragons buried beneath hills, of knights with lion hearts, of saints who wrestled demons with nothing but prayer and stubbornness. Someone passes around a cup of cider, warm, spiced, slightly sour. You drink deeply. The girl with the violet ribbon is still there. She leans against your shoulder briefly, doesn't speak, just sighs. You feel human again. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers lived mostly in fear or whether they found joy in spite of it. Looking around, you're convinced it's the latter. People don't just survive. They sing. They tell jokes. They fall in love in barley fields. They slip each other extra bread and dance on sore feet. The bonfire crackles louder. You hear someone snoring in the grass. A dog curls up by your ankles. The priest stands and offers a quiet benediction. Not a sermon, just thanks. For harvest, for safety, for making it this far. You whisper your own version in your head. Thank you for one good day. One day without digging or rats or plague or sheep thieves. One day where being alive didn't feel like a losing battle. Eventually, you stumble to your pallet in the corner of a barn. You collapse onto the straw and stare at the rafters, lit faintly by the glow of a torch outside. And for the first time in weeks, you sleep through the night. No coughing, no nightmares, no flute music from unseen sources. Just deep, quiet rest. In the morning, of course, everything returns. Work, cold, the usual aches in your bones. But something's changed. People hum as they wash clothes. Children draw chalk symbols on the stones. A woman gives you an apple just because. The steward doesn't yell for a full hour. It's not heaven, but it's livable. Then a rider comes, clad in a deep blue cloak, hooded, horse dust streaked and wide-eyed from hard travel. They stop at the village square, dismount, and unfurl a scroll. It's sealed with a royal mark. You're close enough to hear the words. War. The rider reads aloud, and the village goes quiet. The scroll's words are heavy, formal, stained with ink and authority. Something about border conflict, something about mobilizing levies. But all you hear is the word war, echoing in your ears like a church bell you can't unring. You look around. Old men glance at the ground. Young boys puff up their chests. Mothers hold their children a little tighter. And the steward, he just sighs and rubs his temples like someone told him tax season's been extended. Mainstream historical fact. In feudal Europe, kings and lords often had the legal right to conscript peasants for military service. Levies, compulsory enlistments, could be called up in times of war, especially for defense. Training was minimal, and the peasants were expected to bring their own gear, assuming they had any. You, of course, don't. Your possessions include one wooden spoon, a threadbare tunic, and a pair of shoes that may or may not belong to your dead neighbor, Kevin. The rider, who turns out to be a herald, starts listing names. He mispronounces most of them, but that doesn't matter. When yours comes up, it feels like someone slapped the back of your neck with a cold fish. You're going to war. You, who can barely swing a rake without injuring yourself. You, who once fainted at the sight of your own blood when you accidentally bit your tongue too hard. You, who thought flanking maneuver was a type of dance move. You're definitely going to die. You have 3 days to prepare, which is really just a polite way of saying, Figure out how not to soil yourself when someone charges at you with a spear. The village offers what it can. A retired soldier helps train you. You're given a helmet that smells like old cheese, a spear with a cracked shaft, and a shield made of, no joke, recycled barrel wood. Quirky tidbit. During particularly underfunded military campaigns, some medieval armies conscripted musicians, farmers, and even monks to fight with whatever was available: farming tools, sharpened sticks, or the occasional very angry goose. Your training consists of hitting a tree repeatedly until it gives you splinters. The veteran soldier, a man named Gerald with one eye and the sense of humor of a moldy turnip, yells instructions at you. Keep your feet wide. Don't flinch like a frightened deer. Try not to cry this time. You cry anyway, but less than last time, so that's technically progress. Historians still argue whether peasant levies were truly effective on the battlefield or if they served more as cannon fodder, filling ranks while the real fighting was done by knights and trained men-at-arms. You try not to think about which category you fall into. By the second day, you can thrust your spear without closing your eyes. By the third, you can block Geralt's wooden sword 5 times in a row before getting knocked on your rear. A personal best. The morning of departure comes cold and gray. You line up with 12 others from the village, each carrying mismatched weapons and expressions of dread. The steward gives you a brief speech, something about honor, service, and making the village proud. Then he hands you a tiny cloth badge with your manor's crest on it. It's a goose. You try not to laugh or cry, probably both. You march. The road is long, and your feet are already blistered by noon. Your pack chafes. Your spear keeps knocking into the guy beside you. Someone starts singing a war song and is told to stop before morale collapses completely. At night, you sleep under the stars, wrapped in your own fear and what passes for a blanket. You dream of dragons and fire and shouting in a language you don't recognize. When you wake up, the world smells like damp grass and impending doom. You reach the muster point. It's chaos. Dozens of other levies from neighboring villages, squires barking orders, tents that smell like wet fur, horses stomping, knights polishing armor that gleams like fairy tales. You've never seen so much steel in one place. You feel like a potato among fireworks. A gruff man with a scroll assigns you to a company. Your captain, a wiry woman with 3 scars across her cheek, sizes you up and sighs. You'll go in the middle, she says. Just try not to die too loud. Solid leadership. You train for 4 more days. Formation drills, marching, shield walls, basic commands. You're given new gear, a sharper spear, a better shield, a slightly less stinky helmet. You even make a friend. His name's Ewan. He's from a fishing village and got conscripted after accidentally harpooning a noble's boat. He's funny. He shares bread. He says if you survive, he'll teach you how to catch eels with your toes. You start to believe you might survive. Then the orders come. You're moving out. An enemy force has breached the border, burned 2 villages, and is now marching on a key fortress. Your company is to intercept them in a narrow valley. Everyone's suddenly quieter. The jokes stop. The food tastes like dust. You write your name in the dirt with a stick just to see it one last time. You march again. The sun never comes out that day. Mist clings to everything. Your boots squelch. Your mouth is dry. Ewan hums a lullaby under his breath. You reach the valley. The battlefield is a narrow throat of land, flanked by hills choked with fog. The enemy hasn't arrived yet. You take your place in the formation, middle row, right flank. You grip your spear. You wait. You whisper something to the wind, maybe a prayer, maybe just your name. Then the horns sound, and the world becomes noise. You never imagined the end of the world would begin with a trumpet, not the clear, shining blast of fairy tales, but a coarse, cracked blare that sounds like someone strangling a sick goose. You don't even see the enemy yet, just movement through the fog, shadows shifting behind curtains of mist. Then thunder, not sky thunder, hoof beats, hundreds of them pounding like war drums. You feel them in your ribs, your bones, your very teeth. You want to run, but there's nowhere to go. Your captain yells the command, "Shields up!" You lift yours automatically. It's heavier than you remember, and your arms already ache. Around you, dozens of other terrified peasants do the same, creating a shaky wall of hope and desperation. It creaks like old floorboards. Mainstream historical fact. Medieval battles often relied on shield walls, a tightly packed line of soldiers locking shields together to resist cavalry or infantry charges. It required discipline and unity, neither of which your group really has. The enemy emerges from the fog like phantoms. They don't look that different from you, just slightly better armor, slightly sharper weapons, slightly meaner faces. You think one of them might even be barefoot. Then they charge. It's less a graceful maneuver and more a furious stampede. They're yelling, screaming, banging swords on shields. You brace for impact, and when it comes, it's worse than you thought. You're shoved back. Your shield splinters. Your ears ring. Someone next to you screams. Your spear lurches forward, hits something solid. You don't know if it was armor, flesh, or air. Everything is chaos. The shield wall collapses within seconds. Someone grabs you by the shoulder and spins you. You swing wildly, striking a man in the thigh. He falls, clutching his leg, and for a second, you just stare. Did you do that? Before you can process, someone else tackles you from the side. You hit the ground hard, your helmet slipping over your eyes. You kick, flail, roll. You come up gasping, alive, covered in mud and something that might be blood, but you hope is berry juice. The captain is still shouting. You see her dragging someone out from beneath a fallen horse. She looks like a goddess of rage, blood-slicked and fearless. You're not quite that. Quirky tidbit. Some medieval battles were so disorganized that peasants often fought with no armor at all and carried farming tools like flails, sickles, or sharpened spades. There are even records of soldiers using cooking pots as helmets and wooden doors as makeshift shields. You, to your credit, are still holding your spear. Barely. Someone charges you again. This time, you duck. Pure luck. You jab upward and feel the tip catch something soft. The man screams and collapses on top of you. You push him off and scramble to your feet, stomach churning. You realize something horrible. You've never killed anything before. You don't know if you just did. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood the scale of war before experiencing it firsthand. For many, it was their first and last battle. They had no context for strategy, just orders, fear, and whatever instincts they could summon. You're mostly summoning the urge to curl into a ball and cry. Then, as suddenly as it began, the enemy pulls back. Retreating? No. Regrouping. Your captain orders a fallback behind a pile of broken carts. You stagger with the survivors, less than half of the original company. You don't see Ewan. Your heart sinks. The second charge comes faster. You're ready this time. Sort of. You scream back. You swing harder. You catch someone across the side with your shield, then stab low with your spear. A blur of metal, a jolt up your arm, the wet sound of connection, and then silence. Like someone pulled the world's plug. A horn sounds again, this time from your side. Reinforcements. Knights. Real ones. They descend from the ridge like avenging angels. Armor gleaming, swords raised. The enemy hesitates, and that's enough. The charge hits them like an avalanche. You watch, dazed, as trained cavalry tears through the ranks that nearly ended you. You slump against a rock, shield resting on your knees. Breathing hurts. Everything hurts. But you're alive. Barely. You find Ewan after the battle. He's limping, bloody, missing an eyebrow. But alive. Thought you were a goner. He grins, teeth red. Same, you manage. Neither of you says what you're both thinking. Next time, you might not be so lucky. That night, you sit beside a fire with a few survivors. No one talks much. Someone passes around a skin of wine. You take a sip and feel it burn your cracked lips. You close your eyes and see flashes, screaming faces, glinting steel, the look in the eyes of the man you stabbed. You wish you could cry, but your body is too exhausted to do anything but sit there. Eventually, someone begins to sing softly, a lullaby. You think it might be the same one Ewan hummed earlier. You drift off, hunched over your knees, dreams tangled with fire and fog. By morning, you're ordered back to camp. No celebrations, just clean-up duty. You and Ewan shovel dirt over shallow graves. You don't ask names. The war isn't over, not by a long shot, but your role in it, at least for now, is done. You're discharged after 2 more weeks of minor skirmishes and miserable marching. Your hands are blistered. Your ears ring at odd hours. Your dreams are haunted by phantom hoofbeats. But when you return to the village, you're not the same. People stare, some with admiration, some with pity. You don't know which you prefer. The steward grants you 2 extra loaves of bread for valor. And the old soldier Gorell pats your back and mutters something about not dying like a complete idiot. High praise. You sit by the river that evening, washing mud from your boots. Your hands tremble. You survived a medieval war. Barely. And you're left with one unshakable conclusion. You definitely wouldn't last another. You wake up before dawn. There's no trumpet this time. No thunder of hooves or screaming soldiers, just bird song. Gentle, slow, like they're easing you into the day. Your limbs ache, but the pain has dulled into something familiar now. Less sharp, more background noise. You stretch your arms, crack your knuckles, and sit on the edge of your straw-stuffed pallet, watching light leak into the sky. Your hut is still standing. That's something. There's a soft knock at the door. It's Ewan. He's holding 2 wooden bowls of porridge, thin but warm. You eat together in silence, watching mist curl across the fields. After a while, he speaks. "I think I'm going to leave," he says. You nod. No surprise. After everything, the idea of staying put feels strange, unsafe even. Like waiting for the next disaster. Where? North. Heard they're hiring stonemasons. You look at his hands. Calloused, bandaged, strong. You smile. You're terrible at stonework. He grins back. I know. I'll probably die under a fallen archway. You both laugh. It feels good. Real. He leaves by noon. You help him pack. Bread, smoked fish, a tiny carved wolf you made during winter. He ties it to his belt like a charm. Then he's gone, just like that. No tearful goodbyes. Just a nod, a wave, and a long walk down a dirt path. You spend the day mending a fence, then helping repair a cart axle. You're decent with wood now. Decent at many things, actually. Fear, as it turns out, is a phenomenal teacher. Mainstream historical fact. By the late Middle Ages, surviving peasants were often more skilled than their ancestors. Wars, plagues, and famines forced them to learn trades, barter, build, and adapt to survive. Labor shortages even increased wages in some areas. Briefly, you eat dinner with Gerald that night. He's older now, quieter. He asks about the battle. You tell him a little, not everything, just enough. He nods, tosses a bone to a stray dog and says, "Still breathing, that's the win." Later, you sit outside alone. The moon is full. A soft breeze rustles the trees, and you hear the faint echo of flute music again. You smile. You're not even sure it's real, but it's comforting, like an old memory that never quite fades. Quirky tidbit. In parts of medieval folklore, it was believed that if you heard mysterious music in the woods and followed it, you might disappear for 7 years, or come back with silver in your shoes and no memory of what happened. You think about following it, just for fun, but you don't. Instead, you go to bed early. You dream of a bath, a real one, with soap and everything. Then you dream of Kevin the goat, wearing a crown, bleating at a crowd of peasants as if giving a royal speech. You wake up laughing. No one questions it. The next few weeks are steady. Crops begin to recover. The church is rebuilt with help from visiting masons. The blacksmith gets married. You attend the celebration and dance until your knees protest. You've been here long enough now that you're part of the place. Still, you never forget. Sometimes, in the quiet hours of early morning, you remember the mud of war, the hollow look of plague victims, the biting cold of winter, the sting of that first sunburn. You remember the smell of burning hair, the blur of lightning in the forest, and the ridiculous joy of catching that escaped pig. You remember the impossible rhythm of medieval life, its cruelty, its color, its absurdity. Historians still argue whether people in the Middle Ages were miserable or just resilient. Maybe they laughed more than we think. Maybe they wept quietly, worked until their bones gave out, and then woke up the next day and did it again. Maybe they weren't so different from us after all. One day, you visit the edge of the village where the land flattens into open grassland. You sit there for hours, just watching the wind move across the tall grasses. Somewhere behind you, a child is calling to her mother. A dog barks. A bell rings for evening prayer. You don't move, because this is the moment you realize you made it. You lived an entire life in the Middle Ages, and despite famine, disease, war, superstition, goats, idiotic stewards, and everything in between, you survived, and now your journey comes to a close. The fires have gone out. The fields are quiet. Somewhere far away a wolf howls, but even that sound seems gentle, almost like a lullaby carried on the breeze. You rest your head back on the softest patch of grass you can find. The stars are above you, glimmering like they did 1,000 years ago, untouched by war, plague, or time. The moonlight bathes your worn clothes, your tired hands, your scarred but steady breath. The pain in your back has faded, the weight in your chest lifted. The world spins slowly, gently, just as it always has. And though you know this world was harsh, impossible even, it was also alive, messy, real, and in a strange, crooked way, beautiful. So close your eyes now. Let the wind wrap around your shoulders like a warm blanket. Let the hush of the fields calm your restless mind. Let the scent of old wood, smoke, and damp earth drift you downward into the softest dreams you've had in ages. You're no longer a peasant, no longer a soldier. You're just you, floating in a space between then and now. And here, finally, you can rest, because you made it, and that's enough. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.